This conference will now be recorded.
I'd like to resume the City of Salmon Arm regular council meeting of Tuesday, April 14th. Welcome back, everyone. I've read the acknowledgement of traditional territory. We'll adopt the agenda. Is there any additions from staff?
Your Worship, there are 2 letters or emails which have come in for one of the items this evening. So we've provided those to council.
Right, for item 23.1 and 24.1, the rezoning, and I'll make sure I mention them again at that time. Thank you. Councillors, are there any additions to the agenda from council? Seeing none, we'll operate the same way we did before. Thank you. I think we're getting used to this. Using the chat line, councillors, if you wish to speak, staff will have their mics open and councillors have their mics closed. We'll start with the disclosure of interest. Is there any disclosure of interest by any councillors?
Yes, Your Worship. I would disclose on 10.2. I stepped out in the planning because Brown Johnson was shown as the applicant. As it turns out, they aren't the applicant, but I'm going to step out anyway.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Flynn, for 10.2. So you can just leave just before that time?
Yeah, they're just the they are just the surveyors and doing the work, but they're not the owners, but I'm still going to step out.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any other disclosure of interest? Welcome to our meeting, Ange. Your item will come up soon. Okay, council, we're at confirmation of minutes of the regular council meeting, March the 23rd, 2020. We have a motion.
You cut out there, Your Worship. I don't hear what you said.
Oh, okay. Let me try again. Confirmation of the minutes of the regular council meeting of March the 23rd. We have a motion.
Moved by Councillor Lindgren, seconded by Councillor Cannon, that March 23rd, 2020 be adopted as circular.
Is there any additions or deletions to those minutes? Any councillor opposed, please put on the chat line. I'll call the question. Passes unanimously. Thank you. Confirmation of minutes of the special council meeting of April the 6th. We have a motion.
Moved, seconded by Councillor Lavery, the special council minutes of April 6, 2020 be adopted as circulated.
Any additions or omissions from those minutes? Please indicate on the chat line. I will call the question then. I see it passes unanimously. We'll now go to item 7.1, committee reports, Development and Planning Services Committee minutes of April 6th, 2020. We have a motion.
Moved by Councillor Lindgren, seconded by Councillor Wallachman, that the Development and Planning Services Committee meeting minutes of April 6, 2020 be received as information.
Any additions or deletions? Yes, I see Councillor Flynn noted, Carl, that you are echoing a little bit for me too. Okay, I'll call the question on the minutes. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Columbia Shuswap Regional District update. Is there any update from we don't have a written update. Is there any update from our representatives, Councillor Flynn or Councillor Eliason at this time?
The board meeting is on Thursday.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move forward to staff reports. Item 9.1, Director of Development Services, Agricultural Land Commission application number 391. A motion and a second to get it on the floor. Please indicate with the chat line. Moved by Councillor Eliason. Seconded by Councillor Lavery. Thank you. Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a non-farm use application for Lakeland Farms Limited. A large 160-acre property located at 6710 50th Avenue Southwest in Salmon Valley. The property is in the Agricultural Land Reserve. The applicant, Mike Schroeder, would like to construct a feed mill, relatively small in relation to the property size. 334 square meters in area would be the footprint. Normally, this would not require a Agricultural Land Commission application, but because there's a possibility that more than 50% of the product may be imported, that triggers a non-farm use application and permit required by the Land Commission. And this went to the Planning Committee meeting, the last one, where it was supported by the Planning Committee. And Mr. Schroeder was in attendance at that meeting.
Great, thank you. Council, questions or comments? Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I fully support this idea, the application to the Agricultural Land Commission, and it's probably more of a personal note, but the Schroeders are young farming families who are trying to do things the correct way. And so I think the combination of all these factors here, the last couple don't support. I'm speaking in favor of the application to the ALC, but this is a good news story.
Councillor Lavery, thank you for your question. Councillor Lindgren, applicants don't normally speak at first and second reading at the council meeting. They make their input at the planning meeting. So Mr. Schroeder is not with us, although we did hear from him at planning. Thank you for your question. Any other comments around this application? Okay, thank you. I certainly echo Councillor Lavery's comments, and I have a bit of a personal attachment to this property. It's the Reed, a piece of the Reed property right beside where Mount Ida Hall used to be, and I know it very well. So really pleased to see that it's going to be put to good use. Councillor Flynn. Oh, that's a vote. Thank you. Yeah, Councillor.
I was already voting, sorry.
That's okay, you're ahead of us. Councillor Lindgren, yes, Mr. Schroeder did speak to us at the planning meeting. Okay, I'll call the question then. If you're opposed, please indicate. I see no opposed. It passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll go to item number 2. Director of Engineering and Public Works, public use tenure. Could I have a motion to bring that to the table, please? Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Wallace Richmond. Thank you. Director of Engineering and Public Works.
So, Your Worship, this is in when we started the project for the new boat launch construction at Canoe Beach. We were doing the proper applications for the construction, and it was realized that there is no tenure over the Canoe Beach area for the city. So we, as part of the application process, we require a council resolution, and we're seeking that now. So this would be a resolution to apply for a 10-year for 25-year period over the Canoe Beach area.
Thank you. Questions for the Director of Engineering and Public Works or comments? Councillor Cannon.
I just had a question in regards to that. Was it a tenure that had expired, or did we never have the tenure on that?
Of Engineering and Public Works.
Your Worship, the city never had a tenure over this area. The works for the original boat launch were approved. However, it was realized that we needed to get tenure over the beach area as well.
Councillor Cannon, any comments? Okay, we'll go to Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. With all of the changes happening on the other side of the boat launch, do we have tenure on that land? Or will that be coming forward once the lease lots are vacated?
Good question. Thank you. Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Your worship, we do not require tenure on the Canoe Beach lease lots because that is owned by the city.
That's a pretty good answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery, question and comment.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I had the same question as Councillor Flynn, and I'll certainly support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I will call the question then. Please indicate if you are opposed. I see none opposed. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll move to presentations. Welcome to Angie Spencer from BDO Canada, 2019 audited financial statements. It's nice to have you on the line, Angie. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you, Council, for your time today. I am here from BDO as your independent auditor and just going to be reporting on the December 31st, 2019 financial statements. I figured what's likely easiest is for me to give an overview of the financial statements. I will call out which pages I'm referring to as I'm walking through them, just so that you're able to follow along within the financial statements in your agenda. So on page 2 and 3 of the financial statements included in your package, this discloses our overall independent audit report, and I'm happy to report that we are issuing a unqualified audit opinion, meaning that the financial statements are free of any material misstatement. So the status of the audit, we are substantially complete. It's subject to your approval of the financial statements today. We also would have released our report to the board, which has any significant audit findings. Again, I'm happy to report that there were no significant control weaknesses identified as a result of our audit this year, and no omissions or disclosures that weren't updated in the financial statements that you're looking at today. I'm now going to just give an overview of the financial statements. So page 4 is the balance sheet as at December 31st. Cash is consistent with prior year. Current surplus was utilized in acquiring capital projects, investing in infrastructure, and also contributing to reserves. So overall cash at December 31st came in at just over $1.2 million. Investments increased by $10.8 million, representing the excess surplus for the year that was contributed and to investments for future projects and also for reserves. Accounts receivable overall decreased compared to last year. There was some significant funding at the end of 2018 that was not a recurring accounts receivable for 2019. And the remaining other assets fairly similar to prior year. So overall assets of the city came in at $71.8 million. In terms of liabilities, very comparable to last year. The largest changes were around deferred revenue, some projects that were put on hold, so funding receiving related to those have been deferred, as well as an increase of the overall deferred capital contributions. Long-term debt has increased. There was the 2 new bylaw funds, the Ross Street Underpass and Airport Taxi, that were approved during the year, and that's been offset by some payments that were made during the year. Tangible capital assets for the city at December 31st came in at book value of $209 million. So overall, there was a significant number of upgrades, 751,000 in land acquisitions, 1.9 million in equipment and machinery for public works, and 4.7 million in transportation infrastructure. These additions were offset by amortization during the year. So overall, the accumulated surplus for the year came in at $239 million. So on to page 5, which is the statement of operations. This is a summary of revenue and expenses for the year. Overall revenues came in at just over $38 million. A large piece of that, of course, is taxation, which was up about 5% over last year, which is consistent with the rate increases. Grant revenues, those actually decreased over last year. There was some 2008 grants received that related to the wildfires and emergency preparedness grants. That was not reoccurring in 2019. There was also some significant capital grant for sewer upgrades in 2018 that created the increase last year. The revenue streams are fairly consistent with prior year. For expenditures came in at 31.4 million. This is fairly flat compared to last year in terms of expenses. There was some increases across the board with the new employer tax that came into effect, but that was offset by some savings around some of the additional costs in 2018 related to flood management and forest fires. Also, that was offset by an increase in public health services due to the new garbage and recycling programs that came into place last year. So as I mentioned, total cost came in at 31.4 million and creating an annual surplus of 6.578 million this year. That does not include principal debt repayments or transfers to reserves for future spending. So I'm not going to go through all of the notes to the financial statements. Those just illustrate further detail on the numbers that we've gone over. There hasn't been any significant changes to public sector accounting standards. I will highlight, though, that we did put in a note to the financial statements, note 12, which is noted on page 19 of the financial statements, just to highlight the uncertainty around the COVID-19 situation and the fact that this will likely have a significant impact on the city going forward, but at this time it's really difficult to ascertain what kind of impact that might have. So that's all I had on the financial statements. Is there any questions related to those at all?
Council, any questions for Ms. Spencer at this time? I don't see any questions, Angie.
Okay. I do just want to express my gratitude as well to your exceptional finance team. This year was, like everything we're experiencing in the last few weeks, been very unprecedented. So we, for the safety of our team and your team, had to actually work remotely for the majority of the time on this audit. And your team did just an exceptional job of adapting quite quickly and accommodating our needs so that we were able to meet the timelines. So thank you very much to Tracy and Bianca.
Thank you, and thank you, Angie, as well. I know they really appreciate working with you, and thank you to our staff. We appreciate you joining us online.
Great. Thanks very much.
Council motions related to that are under staff reports 9.3, Chief Financial Officer 2019 financial statements. We have a proposed motion that the financial statements for the year ending December 31st, 2019 be adopted as presented. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved it by Councillor Eliason. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Lavery. Tracy, would you like to speak to that, Chief Financial Officer?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the draft financial statements have been provided. I emailed them out last week. The memo that is attached to the agenda summarizes the changes between 2018 and 2019, which was also discussed by Angela Spencer in her presentation. So rather than duplicate some of the information discussed, I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Council, any questions for our Chief Financial Officer? Seeing none, I will call the question. I'd like to get it in favor or opposed to this one, please. So if you are in favor, please indicate. Thank you. That passes unanimously. And thank you, Tracy, to you and your team for all your hard work. Much appreciated. Item 9.4 is Chief Financial Officer 2020 Assessment New Construction. It's for information. I'd ask our Chief Financial Officer just to review it for us. There's no motion attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the 2020 assessment notices have been issued and a summary of the average inflationary changes is provided. Class 1 residential properties saw an average increase of 1.41% compared to 5.91% in 2019. It is important to note that the tax rate is adjusted to collect the same amount of revenue as in 2019, plus any approved tax increase by council. For 2020, the tax increase is 0. As a result, the only time property owners will see an increase or decrease in their general municipal levy beyond the approved tax increase, which is 0, is if their assessment increases or decrease is higher or lower than that average assessment change of the 1.41%. The new growth factor projected for 2020 was 2%, and the actual new growth factor was 2.03%. So very, very close to the budgeted projected growth factor.
Thank you very much. Councillors, I'll open up to any questions you might have for the Chief Financial Officer around those assessment averages. Okay, I see no questions and there's no motion attached to that. So we'll move on in our agenda to introduction of bylaws, section 10. The first one is the City of Salmon Arm Canoe Pond Water Course and Drainage System Bylaw 4388. First, second, and third reading. We have a proposed motion. Moved by Councillor Eliason, seconded by Councillor Cannon. Thank you. I'll ask the Director of Engineering and Public Works to speak to us about it.
Your Worship, I believe that the city engineer spoke to this at the previous council meeting, and it's in regards to obtaining a essentially a right-of-way over the flooding areas of Canoe Pond. And it's essential for any future development in that, around that area, because Canoe Pond acts as a storm detention pond for the city.
Thank you. And Ms. Wilson did talk to us at planning, but I will open up for any questions that council may have at this time. Seeing none, I'll call the question. If you're opposed, please indicate. I see no opposed, so the motion passes unanimously. We're on item 10.2, so I know Councillor Flynn is leaving his computer at this time. It's City of Salmon Arm Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4375, Lewis, 710 10th Street Southwest, R1 to R5, first and second reading. We have a proposed motion. Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Eliason. Thank you. Director of Planning and Development.
Your Worship, this is a rezoning application for the property addressed at 710 10th Street Southwest. There's presently a single-family dwelling on the property. There's also an application to subdivide the property, to subdivide off a smaller piece around the house. But the proposal is to rezone all of the land from R1 single-family residential to R5 high-density residential for future development possibilities. There is no development plan at this time, and the applicant is Steve Lewis.
Thank you. I'll open it up for questions or comments from council. Okay, seeing none, my only comment would be it's in line with the official community plan. Perfect place for a high density development right by the mall and on a flat piece of land. I will support it. I'll call the question. If you're opposed, please indicate. I see no one opposed, so the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Councillor, you may return. We're on to item 10.3, City of Salmon Arm Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4389, Chance, 2760 30th Street, R1 to R8, first and second reading. We have a proposed motion. I could have a mover and a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Cannon. Or moved by Councillor Cannon. Sorry, I need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Lindgren. Thank you very much. Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, this rezoning bylaw proposes to rezone the lot addressed at 2760 30th Street Southeast from R1 to R8 residential suite zone. The property is at the corner of 28th Avenue and 30th Street Northeast in North Broadview. The report refers to South Broadview. That's an error. It is North Broadview. And there's also a subdivision application associated with this to subdivide the property into 3 lots and to keep the existing house as a central lot. So a proposed lot to the west on the corner and a proposed lot to the east. The applicant is Craig Shantz.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions for the director or comments? Seeing none, I will call the question. Again, please indicate if you are opposed. I see no one opposed. The motion passes unanimously. We'll go to item 10.4, City of Salmon Arm Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4381, Wild Blue Developments Limited, 271 3rd Street Southeast, R1 to R8. First and second reading. We have a proposed motion. Moved by Councillor Eliason. Seconded by Councillor Cannon. Thank you. Director of Development Services.
These 2 properties are located in the residential core area near the downtown on 3rd Street Southeast. There's one address for both properties. They were hooked for financial taxation reasons. They have been unhooked. So they are 2 separate titles, and they front onto a street and a lane. The proposal is to rezone the properties from R1 single family residential to R8 residential suite zone for the construction of 2 single family dwellings, possibly with or without a detached suite on each.
Thank you. Questions or comments for the director on this item? Councillor Lindgren.
Just a comment. This is my street downtown, and those lots have been vacant for quite a while now. Before that, there was a house on it that was not well taken care of. So I think probably the people on our street, me and for certain, are happy to see that development's going to start happening there, and there are going to be some nice, tidy, clean houses set up instead of the vacant lot that's there now.
Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. Any other comments or questions? I'll call the question. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We'll move to item 10.5, City of Salmon Arm Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4377, Gilmore, 396th Street Southeast, R1 to R8, first and second reading. We have a proposed motion. Need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Eliason. Thank you. Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, this is another corner lot located at the corner of 4th Avenue and 6th Street Southeast. The proposal is to rezone this property from R1 to R8 residential suite zone in order to construct a detached suite on the eastern portion of the property. And in your agenda, you have plans, a site plan, and elevations showing a proposed detached suite on the east yard. As the report mentions, development cost charges are payable, must be paid for a detached suite. The applicant is aware of that, and the OCP supports the zoning. In fact, the OCP supports R5 in this area.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments on this item for the director? Seeing none, I'll call the question. If you're opposed, please indicate. I see no one opposed, so the motion passes unanimously. We'll now go to item 10.6. This is regarding the 2020 final budget, which we've been working on. I'll ask the Director of Finance to go over the items. There's 2 motions. Then I'll ask for the motion and then open it up for questions and comments from council. Director of Finance.
Thank you, Your Worship. This amendment is to reflect 2020 assessments and taxes, carry forward projects, tax requisitions from other governments, council resolutions made thus far in the year, and to redirect allocations between budget accounts. The budget and associated tax rate bylaw reflects a 0% tax increase approved by council and actual new construction of 2.03%. It also reflects the equalization of tax rates between Class 5 and Class 6 per Council's 2017 resolution, as well as a $50,000 in taxation revenue has been shifted from Class 4 major industry to Class 1 residential for the 2020 taxation year as per Council's resolution. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding this.
Thank you. Could you also just comment on, because we're doing them two together, 4392, the bylaw to allow a later collection of taxes?
Yes, I can. So in bylaw 4392, we have included, let me just get to the right page. We have included a section from the Community Charter 235, which establishes an alternative municipal tax collection scheme. And it allows us to change or revise our property tax due date to July the 30th of 2020. And upon the following day, July 31st, 2020, the 10% taxation penalty would be applied on any unpaid current year property taxes.
Great, thank you very much for that overview. We have a motion on the floor. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Lavery, seconded by Councillor Lindgren. Thank you. And I'll let questions or discussion be quite open because this is about the 2020 budget. So if you would like to speak to it or have questions, please indicate. Thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question or comment to staff, or a question to staff. Tracy, I wanted to thank you and Councillor Eliason for his question related to amount of taxes prepaid in a typical year through monthly payments, mortgages, and things like that. And it looks like in your analysis you gave us that it's about 20% of our total taxation. Did I read that right?
Director of Finance.
Through Your Worship, yes, approximately 20% would be those collected taxes that you are referring to.
Okay, I was actually hoping it was closer to 70 or 80%, but bottom line is, as of an extended date, which is what we're voting on to support, and a 0% tax increase, our taxes will be due at the end of July this year, and any penalties will be applied after that date to any late taxes. And we still need to collect about 80% of taxes people pay. The majority of people pay sometime in usually June, but this year in July. Is that's the safe summary to take from your information?
Director of Finance.
It's hard to say what the citizens will do. But yes, they do have the option to extend their payment until July the 30th.
Okay, thank you. I have never in all my years on council been one to vote against a budget. We spend a lot of time discussing our budgets. We spend a lot of time with staff creating budgets, prioritizing projects. I am supporting 0%. I'm supporting the delay. I'm supporting how the taxes have been calculated by category, but I cannot vote in support of this budget. In my mind, we have not done nearly enough on the expense side of the equation to look at projects that should be cut. And I feel the only way I can illustrate that I am not in support of this is by voting against the budget overall, although I support most of it. I think we need to revisit the expense side and cut projects that don't have to be done in 2020. We just had our accountant or our financial people who do our auditing. At the end of her comment, she stated that who knows what 2020 is going to look like. We're estimating 2% new growth. In light of COVID, that might be too high. And I do not feel comfortable not cutting more expenses on our budget. So as much as I support 90% of what is here, I cannot in all consciousness vote in support of the budget as it stands. I want to discuss and see more spending cuts.
Great, thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and I appreciate Councillor Flynn's comments. From my perspective here, this is all about trying to calculate not only the amount of revenue stream, but when it's going to come in and how to model this. And it's very unclear. And we are not the only local government who is struggling to deal with this. I do have a couple of general comments, Your Worship. I will be supporting the budget, albeit with the same similar concerns to Councillor Flynn. And I do have a question at the end about our interim borrowing bylaw that we've passed early in the new year. I mean, the challenge in front of us here is really to focus on core essential municipal services. I think in the past we've done that with really prudent decision making and prudent advice from staff and rigorous financial scrutiny. And I still see that in the document that's in front of us now. We have started to reduce non-essential spending. I think that we have the ability in the next while to look at that more closely as things develop. The conversation this week is completely different than the conversation last week. And so I see with the budget process we have here, we have some room to do that. We're holding off on external hiring. And we do have, I believe, a very rigorous scrutiny process internally that we can look at this. So again, the conversation may be different next week and the week after. Significant concerns about revenue stream. I do think we have the ability to adjust, and I think adjustment means down the line, it's staffing and projects. But I think at this stage, at this snapshot, and I'm not speaking against Councillor Flynn's comments here. I think that we need to be and will be on top of this in a very prudent manner. More to come for sure. Your Worship, I do have one question through you to staff. Early in the new year, and it's been, I know I was always surprised when I was first out on council, we passed a bylaw to essentially authorize interim borrowing for up to $1 million under normal circumstances if our revenue taxation doesn't come in at the regular time in early July. My question, Your Worship, to staff is, I believe that bylaw is in place. It's $1 million. I believe it expires maybe early July. So A, am I correct on that? And B, are there options to extend that because we're now extending our taxation until the end of July? And would that require, I guess, C, a bylaw amendment for that, if that's a recommendation of staff?
Thank you for your question. Director of Finance.
Thank you, Your Worship. The revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw was approved back in January 2020. It is for $1 million, and there does not appear to be an expiry date on that. It is good for the entire year.
Thank you, Your Worship. And that's reassuring to know. I guess my second question is, if we do have to ever use that to bridge the gap, and I do again I think that there are going to be revenue strains here, does the accounting for that, the payment of the borrowing for that, does that then come out of what budget?
Director of Finance.
The repayment of the funds would be coming from general revenue. As we collect taxes, we would be required to repay them.
Thank you very much. And that would be over the course of what term? Or just as the revenue comes in?
Director of Finance?
For your worship, I would have to do a little bit more digging on that. My understanding is that it is as the revenue comes in or is available to repay it.
Thank you for that too. So your worship, I guess we can, and staff is very good at getting back to that. It's a factor in these absolutely changing times here. I know all local governments are worried about revenue stream. There may be more serious discussions as we go forward, but I will support what we have in front of us now, given the best snapshot that we have, but also a commitment. And again, for me, an emphasis again to our residents here is that we will make responsible, prudent decision-making in terms of cutting expenses as we monitor how revenue comes in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. Also, my thanks to staff for all of their work on this, and then the changing by the week, and now a 0% tax increase and a delayed payment date, both of which I have supported. While I understand Councillor Flynn's concerns, and I too share them, I also think that we don't have a crystal ball, and the assumption is it's going to get worse before it gets better. But we don't know what that looks like because we've never done this before. So from a strictly economic point of view, I think we also need to be sending signals that we are operating as normally as possible under the current situation and the current information that we have, but that we're proceeding with a huge caution sign, and things are subject to change. And council, we know that budgets do change over any given year, and those of us who've been at this table a while know those motions ebb and flow during a typical year. I also want to recognize that the City of Salmon Arm has an incredibly important economic impact on the community, both in terms of its employees as well as its contractors, and that multiplier effect could well be very important. So I think we need to be careful to signal optimism and caution, and to proceed as normally as possible under the circumstances. But know that if that has to change, council will be responsive to that, and staff is up to the task. So with that, I will tell you that I'm happy to support the budget as is.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace-Richmond. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess for me, like, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, the final budget. So do we have the ability to come back when the situation that we're in, if it lasts longer than anticipated, do we have the ability to come back and make some changes to this budget in front of us?
What we can do, Councillor Cannon, is we can reallocate funds if council decides that there's a project perhaps they don't want to do. They could reallocate those funds to a different spot if they wished.
Okay, so you still have the ability to possibly cut things out of this budget that's taking funds, correct?
That's right.
And we can bring that back. Is there a time limitation on that, or?
Well, we review the budget, as you know, quarterly, and so those funds may well go to the emergency fund. Council may decide that that's the place they have to go if we have to pull more out of the emergency fund than we have so far.
Okay, I too agree with the points that Councillor Flynn has made, and knowing that we can come back and look at projects and possibly, if this, goes on for longer than anticipated, or the crystal ball that we can't look into, I'll support this at this time, but I think that we may have to relook at some things on this budget.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. I did have a couple more questions for staff.
Yes.
Councillor Lavery asked some of them, but that $1 million revenue expenditure bylaw or revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw, in all the years we've done that, is it correct that we've never used it?
Director of Finance?
Thank you, Your Worship. From my understanding, it has never been utilized. It's just been there and available if needed.
Okay, so do you feel that $1 million in these unanticipated, unusual times is enough? Because I do know, as a representative on the MFA board, many communities are asking for double, triple what they've asked for in the past. Do you see any need for us to revisit that, or can we do it at the time? Or should we be making that revenue anticipation bylaw or amount bigger?
Director of Finance?
With the unknown times, that's a hard question to answer. We've never used it in the past. We do have good reserves and savings available. If it's something that you do want to look at as a cushion for future, then we can definitely, or I can definitely research that and get back to you as to what the options are to increase that.
Okay, I mean, my dartboard isn't here anymore, so I have no idea what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, if we have $2 million that we can borrow and we're not sure what's going to happen, maybe that's prudent. I don't know. You don't know. I just know that MFA is seeing bigger requests for this temporary money and is allowing or giving open to lending people more. The other question I had was, and I just want to make sure I understand this, the percentage of late payers in a typical year, you've quoted that to me before approximately, but it's extremely low. Is that correct?
Director of, yep.
It's in the last 3 years, we've collected approximately 95% of our tax revenue. So 5% has remained unpaid after the tax due date.
Okay, and so that 5% gets penalized. That penalty is starting a month later. If we end up at the same 95%, we probably don't have a significant issue. And we probably don't need any more than the $1 million if we even need that. But if that drops by 5%, based on the math you did on the other side of the equation, that's about $1.5 million of decreased revenue at the time. How many years does a person's account have to be in arrears before we start trying to take their property?
Director of Finance?
Property would go to tax sale by legislation if they had 3 years of property taxes outstanding. So for this year, a property would be for sale if it had 2020, 2019, and 2018 property taxes outstanding on the due date of the 4th Monday of September.
So really, late payment or non-payment in 2020, there's very little consequence if it's the first time, or very little recourse for us to collect, correct?
Director of Finance?
What was the question? Sorry, Councillor Flynn.
Go ahead, Councillor. You want to repeat your question?
If 2020 was the first year somebody didn't pay their taxes, we don't have any recourse except the late penalty, and 3 years down the road, if those taxes aren't paid, that's our only recourse, correct?
Director
if your property, yeah, sorry, through your worship, if your property taxes remain unpaid for 2020 at December the 31st, then on January the 1st, 2021, it will roll to arrears property taxes and collect interest on a daily basis, be charged interest on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and as I said, I appreciate as well all the work of staff, all the work of council, all our discussion around budget. And I know we can amend the budget, but I do not think we should be passing the budget as is with the expenditures as is. Everybody has said it's unusual. We're trying to work as normal as possible. We've talked about safety of our staff and our citizens is number one, providing essential services number two. I guarantee you I could probably find $1 million of things that aren't essential services in our expenditures, and I think we should be looking at some of those now. I'm pretty sure we're going to have this discussion in the future. I don't think I have enough support to make cuts today, but I do think we need to look more at the expense side. So I hate to not support 90% of this, but I have to send that message.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Eliason.
Thanks, Your Worship. First off, I appreciate everyone's comments, and I will support this budget. We are an economic driver of the city, and we still need to do the work, and we have staff who are working, and we need the projects for them to do. This budget reflects a 0% tax increase and a net tax decrease for many, thanks to the province rolling back 50% on the hospital and school taxes. So we passed this budget in the fall. We have reacted quickly. We've reacted proactively to address unanticipated or anticipated outcomes of something we didn't expect when we passed this. And so I think we've done a good job at the staff level and at the council table to bring forward this budget, which is a reflection of the sign of the times. I would like to remind council that in approximately 5 months' time, we are going to be addressing the 2021 budget. This budget is fluid. We can change this budget. We can direct staff to delay projects from this year's budget to save money. But in the meantime, the main message is 0% tax increase. If there are things on councillors' lists that they wish to bring forward to remove, I encourage them to do that. I think the interesting work for council is going to be the October and November meetings coming up where we deal with the 21 budget, where we know where we stand on a lot of things and we have a clearer picture of the economic outcomes of this unforeseen reality that we're living in. So while I appreciate the comments, I think we've done a good job showing that we're proactive and we're anticipating stuff and we are nimble. But we cannot run a deficit. And therefore, we've taken the steps right now to do that for our constituents and not increase their tax bill. I look forward to the 2021 budget meeting that I think staff will start working on in 2 months, if not sooner, or 3 months, because we're getting close. So I look forward to working with staff and council on our next budget. But I think in the short term, we're doing a very good job to control costs and also keep the economy moving. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eliason. Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. I too appreciate all the comments of the councillors and the work done by staff. I think that I'm speaking in favor of the budget. I will support it. I think that if we were in a position where we were delaying collecting taxes till November and we had no idea whether or not people were going to be able to pay, that might be a different conversation. But we're only 3.5 months into the fiscal year, and we have lots of time ahead of us to make adjustments as they come up. I think making cuts right now would be premature, and we may end up with people off work and jobs, projects not being completed that could be completed, which might put us in a bad position as well. So I think that waiting another month or two while we see how the COVID issue plays out, we'll know by July 30th what percentage of our property taxes were collected, and that'll give us a much better idea about the changes that we might want to make going forward from there. So I think that with from July till December, or June to December, we have a lot of time to react, and we're already thinking about the changes that might need to be done. So they're not going to catch us by surprise. Lots of things are being considered already, and we'll be able to make decisions during that time to make sure that we turn out a balanced budget. And I think we're doing a good job.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn.
No, Your Worship, I just made a note that after the vote, which I'm pretty sure I'm losing, I wanted to ask staff a question, that's all.
Sure. Yep, no troubles. Is there any other comments by council at this time? Okay, thank you. I'll take my opportunity, first of all, to thank the finance department and the staff who really assisted in the 4-point plan to respond to what we know so far. And as all of you have talked about, it's the unknown that is a struggle. It's a struggle for everyone, financially and health-wise. What have we done? We've limited taxes to a 0% tax increase. There's only one other city municipality in the province that I know of that has done that. In talking to my colleague mayors throughout the province, they're like, wow, how did you do that? And what I tell them is the reason we are able to do that is because past councils, not the one today necessarily, but councils over the last decade and staff have managed the finances here extremely well. And that's enabled us to be able to do that. We've also acted, as difficult it was to lay off our recreation staff, which other communities have done. And we've delayed the collection date. I'd like to talk to taxpayers who are able to pay by the regular date of July 1st, and there are many out there, that we encourage you to do so. We have given that extra month for those who are struggling, or also we may well not have walk-in tax payments at that time. So we want to make sure that people have the time to adjust. I agree with Councillor Eliason that the 2021 budget might be much more difficult. We're going to know much more at that time, and that I think could be when things really hit. What I can share with you in our conversations with Minister Robinson last week, she talked a lot about incentive funding from the province to help cities pull out of the economic challenges. She didn't make any promises. She doesn't know when that's going to be, but she made it clear that it's on the province's mind. Little cities like ours, you just don't have the financial abilities necessarily for large funds. And so there certainly is an awareness on the part of the province that there may well be some help there. I think a part of that is going to come from cities who have planned and have done their very best, such as ours, to try to mitigate the impact. I just had a couple of questions for the Chief Financial Officer. The taxes collected to date are about 20%. In a ballpark, how does that compare to, say, what we collected in 2019 or 2018 at about the same time?
For your worship, the prepaid property taxes through the prepayment plan have remained consistent throughout the years. They've steadily increased over time, but those are consistent funds that we receive from the citizens. The payments paid to the city through mortgage companies on behalf of citizens and the deferment program are also funds that are extremely likely to be received from those and remain consistent levels. So I would say that it's very consistent with prior years with the amount that is collected from those particular items.
So we don't necessarily have to be alarmed. When you hear 20%, you think, well, that's not much, but that sounds like about the norm. I just wanted to comment a little bit about tax requisitions from that we do collect. Some we just collect and pass on, and some actually affect our taxpayers. And I know that other levels of government have done their best to help. And I think the one that Councillor Eliason quoted, the school tax and the 50% reduction to businesses, is a really a positive one. It's not one you have to apply for. All businesses get it. The regional district requisition to the city in 2019, I think I have my numbers right. I will check with the Chief Financial Officer. 2019, we forwarded $957,062 from city taxpayers to the regional district. In 2020, we're due to spend $1,023,316. And I know that you can see from your final budget numbers, that's an increase of $66,315, which is a 7% increase. And I'm curious from our Columbia Shuswap Regional District reps if there's an opportunity either for relief of some of that, or where the CSRD is at with their budgeting. I'm not sure, Councillor Eliason or Councillor Flynn, if you can answer that for me.
I typed in that I would answer. Or am I okay to try to answer?
Yes, please.
Okay. You will recall, Your Worship, on the conference calls and emails that I have sent to Minister Robinson, that the requisition from the regional district had to be into the provincial government last Thursday. We asked to have that deadline extended so we could revisit the budget. But the minister and her team chose not to extend that. So there was no opportunity, like our budget, because of requisitions, to revisit that number. We have discussed that number in a fair bit of detail, that the bulk of it is between the few services that we do share. One is SEP, Shuswap Emergency Program. One is Tourism Shuswap, and the other is Milfoil, that have some increased costs. The Tourism Shuswap increases were partly due to a change in how costs were allocated between tourism and economic development. We do not participate in economic development at the regional district, but there was some economies of scale because those two were together. And in fact, economic development funded by electoral areas was subsidizing tourism. So there's been a shift in the tourism. The time to deal with that budget has come and gone, and we had a discussion at the last regional district board meeting that it was too late to amend the budget for the requisitions. So is there a chance to have them amend that moving forward? I think it's kind of like our budget. They could, and we could see a change. I will have to look into that. And as I said, I have a board meeting on Thursday. But you are correct that that requisition is up, and it's mostly Tourism Shuswap. Now, that all being said, I'm suggesting when this is all over, there's probably nowhere we would want to be spending some money more than encouraging people to come back to the Shuswap and travel here and support our economy. So it may be money well spent down the road. If I had my way, we may have revisited and got to zero, but the timing just wasn't possible.
Well,
You'll also note, I might as well bring the elephant in the room up, the hospital requisition, which is, people think that that's all funded out of our regular taxes and our medical services. Well, hospital boards contribute to capital, and we have a hospital board that covers part of the regional district down to Vernon, And that board, because of a request from IHA, requested a 25% increase. I'm not sure anybody's going to question money spent on health and improving our health system right now, but that's our biggest increase percentage-wise. And we can't, that was already requisitioned as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I know you've done a really good job of making sure that expenses and increases are looked after. What I would ask is that the regional district do look carefully at their budget. They're the same as us. We tax and we supply services, they do the same. And so if it's not able, and I know that we have discussed about the timeline there and understand that the 2021 budget, perhaps there will be more possible opportunity to reflect something different than a 7% increase. Overall, I think our budget, I mean, it is changing. Things are changing out there, and we do not know where we'll be at next month, let alone come July or August. But I think we've done as good a job as we could to date, and I will support the budget. Is there any other questions or comments before I call the question? Councillor Eliason, would you like to talk about the CSRD?
Yeah, just a quick one on that. A lot of our costs there that Councillor Flynn was talking about that weren't explained are also fixed. So one of our requisitions that we pay the CSRD is our waste management, and that's a fixed cost. The same with the building costs, and administration costs, and so on and so forth. So there isn't a lot of room to cut on the city side of that budget, and we will be looking to see if we can get that down, knowing that the cost for the building will be going down in the future because that will be paid off, and what our requisition for that will be decreasing. So that's good long term, but short term there aren't a lot of things other than the tourism, which we'll probably take a look at closely here in the future as what can be cut. So I agree with the comments, Councillor Flynn.
Yeah, no, I appreciate information, because I think what the taxpayer is going to see, they're going to see a 7% increase on their tax bill from the CSRD and a 0% from the city, and they're going to want to know why. So I appreciate that explanation. Is there any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I would ask everyone to register their vote regarding this year's budget. Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn is opposed, and I appreciate that and understand your reasons. Everyone else is in favor. The motion passes. Thank you, Council, for that discussion. We'll move on to item 11, reconsideration of bylaws. So we're back in the 2019 final budget now. And we've looked at all of this before, but this is the final reading. We have a proposed motion. It's a bunch of things together. Moved by Councillor Eliason. Seconded by Councillor Lavery. Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is just to give the 7 bylaws as a result of the 2019 year-end process their final reading. Further to Angela's presentation, it was all pulled together and wrapped up quite nicely. So I want to just say that we are happy with how everything came together for year-end this year.
Thank you. And sorry, Councillor Flynn, I will come back to your question after the vote on this reconsideration. Council, any questions for the Chief Financial Officer or comments? Okay, that was moved by Councillor Eliason, seconded by Councillor Lavery. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Councillor Flynn, let me pass the mic to you.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to ask the Director of Engineering and Public Works, the Chief Financial Officer, to go back over the 2020 budget that we just approved. And if we are sitting down in a month, I would like to know what are not essential, what I would call removable items in case we need to. And clearly, based on the comments from others, first of all, I don't really think we should be spending ourselves out of this. I think we need to react, but I also understand that we are a steady employer, but I don't want to see things that impact significantly workloads or anything else. I just would like the expense side of the equation to be reviewed one more time in the next month.
Would you like to make that motion, Councillor Flynn?
Yes.
Is there a seconder to the motion? Seconded by Councillor Cannon. Councillor Flynn, would you like to speak further to it?
I think I've been pretty clear, and like I said, I begrudgingly did not support the budget, even though I know how hard staff and council have worked on it.
Okay, thank you.
This is the next step I think we need to plan for, that's all.
Director of Engineering and Public Works or Director of Finance, do you want any clarification on the motion or comments?
No, Your Worship, I'm fine.
Thank you. Director of Finance?
No, Your Worship, that's pretty clear.
Okay. And Councillor Flynn, was that 1 month you said in your motion?
I mean, I'm struggling with timing, Your Worship, just from the point of view of really, in my mind, where the rubber's going to hit the road, where we're really going to have to make tough decisions is when we see what happens on the revenue side. And I might be overreacting, but I think if we were a business, which we're not a typical business, we would be doing more to cut expenses.
So is it for 1 month? Like you
I'll
like
go
that?
2 months. 2 months.
Okay. I'm not trying to press you for extra time. I just want to make sure that the timing is right.
I mean, I know we're looking at things as we go with regards to staffing and all of that. So, I mean, I'm almost asking staff, when do they think we could have this discussion that it actually means more than people going, well, we haven't seen revenues go down yet, so what are we worried about?
So was that 1 month or 2 months?
I'm good with 2 months.
Okay, thank you very much. And
as long as we are looking at the expense side of the equation, that's all I'm asking.
Councillor Lavery, are you fine with that 2 months?
Yes.
Okay, and it's your turn to comment.
Thank you, Mayor Harrison. I certainly support this motion. Earlier on in the whole budget discussion, I think I used the words prudent and responsible and rigorous, and that's what I've seen so far. I fully anticipate staff will do that if we put a 2-month limit on here, but I think we're going to be responsive enough to do it week by week as need be. I'm very confident in the capabilities of our staff and actually of our table to be looking at this. We are, I was going to use the word on top of it, but we are trying as best we can to be on top of it. I think Councillor Flynn is talking about sort of a rolling modeling as all these factors change. I think we've had that in place. I think that we need to keep on doing it, and I think that the motion in front of us just formalizes in some way what's already in effect. And I think we do have to look at both streams, revenue stream and expense stream as well. But I just want to emphasize, I think, to the public that we are looking at this closely.
Great, thank you, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Eliason, speaking to the motion.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just making sure that we have more or less officially passed the budget. Is that correct for 2020?
That's right.
So right now, our staff has the direction to send out tax notices reflective of the motion that was just passed. Is that correct?
And that's why we had to do it today, because of the timeline. Yeah.
Okay. So speaking to this motion, which is to review our expenditures going forward in the 2020 budget, will not affect what the taxpayers pay on their tax bill. Am I correct?
That's right. It might affect where the money goes, though.
Okay. So they're going to pay the same no matter what happens because we've just passed that. So I just want to understand the nature of this motion and how it moves forward is that we are asking staff to look at projects that we might be able to cancel, postpone, or delay. Is that correct?
That could be one component, I think. Yep. I maybe should let Councillor Flynn talk to it because he made the motion.
That's my question, because this will not affect what people pay this year. This is going to affect how much money we might not spend off this budget, but essentially the conversation he is looking to have is how funds are paid out this year and how that may affect the 2021 budget. If that's my take on it, maybe I'm missing the point of this motion.
No, I think you're right, and I think you and I have both spoken about the 2021 budget. And so monies that are not spent this year that are put into the emergency fund could well be used in 2021. If in a month or 2 months, it looks like that's going to be something we need to do.
And then, and just to follow up, if a project is canceled or postponed or delayed, the funds that are set aside in reserve for that project stay in that specific project reserve and the funds that were taken from the 2021 budget, those funds are essentially just not spent. So do they go to the emergency reserve or are they reallocated back to general revenue accounts?
If they came from general revenue, they could go wherever council wants them to go. If they're a reserve that's a targeted reserve, of course, we can't move them.
Okay. So I think it's important that we look at projects, and I think it's important that we direct staff to be very conscious of what we're spending money on and how we're spending it. And I'm happy to look at a list in 2 months, but I think at the same time as we're looking at a list in 2 months, that's going to be deep in the preparations, or at least the very start of the preparations of staff is taking for our 2021 budget. Am I correct?
I'll let the Director of Engineering and Public Works speak to that one.
Your Worship, I'm not very clear on what the question was.
I think the question about when projects, well, you go ahead, Councillor Larson.
When are we starting to make the list for the 2021 budget projects?
Your Worship, we sort of already start that list as we move along through the year.
Okay. And so if we delay any projects this year, they get added to the list of what we would include in the 2021 budget year, and then we get to make cuts at that point. Is that correct?
Potentially, yes, that's correct.
Okay, thanks. I'm happy to take thanks for answering my comments and questions. I'm happy to take a look at this motion and take a look at the list in the middle of the summer, but I don't know if it's going to have the direct effect that the mover and the seconder had when they made the motion, which is to affect the 2020 budget. So I think it's a wise move for us to be very critical and very, very, I guess, restrained when we look at the projects going forward for the 2021 budget. And I think this is the nature of that motion. And if that is the nature, I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Well, yeah, it's a response to the unknown. And part of that response might be that we choose to not do some projects in 2020, even though the tax notice is collecting for them based on the budget. But you and the mayor have already said that 2021 is going to be the tough budget. Every business I know has made cutbacks, and we have made staffing cutbacks, but we have not made any expenditure cutbacks. And I want to identify the low-hanging fruit that we could cut, realizing that we could maybe put the money back into our emergency reserve over and above what we're saving on staffing. I don't feel we've done enough. That's why I voted against. And to me, this is the next step, recognizing that it's not going to change what we collect, but I'm pretty sure we're not going to collect at the same percentages we have in the past. So I'm trying to do the prudent planning, starting, I agree with you, staff is already starting 2021, but I think what we look at in 2020 may help us in 2021.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. I'll defer to Councillor Flynn as the mover, but as a seconder of that, my 2021 is intricately linked, but in my view is not the nature of this motion in front of us. It's to say we're making a revenue requisition, but we have to see what revenue we get. And we're going to have to look at the expenditures associated with that in 2020. And at the same time, be dealing with 2021. Staff has got a huge responsibility in front of them here now. I would argue that this is something staff and this table does regularly anyhow. We're just in a much more confined stream as we're dealing with both these taxation years. And what the motion that I seconded, I believe, asked for is just regular updates on both the revenue and expenses from staff over this next short while for 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Any more comments on the motion? Okay, I'll certainly support the motion. I think I agree with you, Councillor Lavery and Councillor Flynn, that we need to keep a close eye as to what's happening. And we may well need to delve into those things. We don't know. But this at least gives us an opportunity to watch closely as things go along. And I think we do a pretty good job of that already, but it's fine to have a motion to make sure everyone's cognizant. Councillor Wallace-Richmond, we'll give you the last word on this.
Thanks, Your Worship. Very much appreciate that. What I hear is we need a belt and suspenders. So I voted for the belt, but I'll vote for the suspenders too. And I appreciate that as things move forward, priorities are going to change and projects, we might have contractors who don't have staff who can't fulfill terms of contracts. So keep in mind, we are not in charge of this thing. We are only responding to it. So with that in mind, I'm happy to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace-Richmond. I'll call a question on the motion. Please do indicate your vote. I think it's important to give everybody have an opportunity, yes or no. Great, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you for the discussion. And Council, I know those discussions around budgets are difficult. I appreciate everyone's input to them. I think we were very thorough there. Okay, we'll move on to 11.2, City of Salmon Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw, number 4345, Muto Holdings, 130 Shuswap Street Southwest. We have a proposed motion. If we could have a mover and seconder. Thank you, Councillor Eliason. Need a second? Thank you, Councillor Cannon. Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, back in October, Council granted third reading to bylaw number 4345 to change the official community plan designation of 130 Shuswap Street Southeast from institutional to high density residential. That bylaw and the associated rezoning bylaw were held after third reading until the Ministry of Transportation approved the rezoning bylaw. And for some reason, the bylaw was caught in a space where nobody knew where it was. And back in the beginning of March, we contacted the ministry to see where it's at, and they found it and they signed it, and we got it back, and so it's on the agenda. The applicant hasn't mentioned anything. It's I don't think they are in a hurry for this, but anyways, the OCP bylaw can be adopted.
Great, thank you very much. Council, any comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. And the next one is the City of Salmon Arm zoning amendment bylaw 4347, which is the zoning piece of that same P3 to R5. This is final reading. I don't think we need a description of it. It's just the zoning piece following the OCP. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Cannon moves, Councillor Elias seconds. Thank you very much. Any comments? I'll call the question. Any opposed? Seeing none, that carries unanimously. We'll go to 11.4, City of Salmon Arm zoning amendment bylaw 4372, West Side Farms, 1490 10th Avenue Southwest, A1 and R1 to C3. This is final reading. We have a proposed motion. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Wallace Richmond moves. Seconded by Councillor Lavery. Thank you. Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Worship. This is a bylaw pertaining to 1490 10th Avenue Southwest, West Side Farms. The conditions for final reading were 1, Ministry of Transportation approval, and the ministry signed off on the bylaw and they sent it back to us. And the second condition was registration of the riparian and floodplain covenant. That covenant was signed by all parties and sent to the Land Titles Office by Mr. Laird's lawyer. We don't have confirmation that it has been registered, but I have no doubt it will be registered. I'm comfortable with the bylaw receiving final reading. If the covenant's not registered, we can deal with that at the subdivision stage.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Cannon.
Thank you. I have a question for Kevin, actually, Development Services. The permitted uses, when it's rezoned, when I was looking at Appendix 3, the ones that have the red numbers on them, could you explain that to me?
Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, Appendix 3 is, do you mind giving me the page number for that? Councillor Cannon?
I think it's 220. That's what it comes up on my tablet.
Oh.
Oh. No, it's under the, oh no, it's 216.
Okay, so the red numbers?
Yeah, what is that?
They are amendments. For example, when council added the use licensee retail store for liquor stores, it was done by bylaw number 3223. So it's just a reference.
Okay, so all the ones that are listed in these permitted uses is what that zoning is permitted to do, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
So there's what was the one that I was looking at? Mobile home sales could be there. And that has a number beside it as well. So is that an amendment or something to that? Or?
Director of Development Services.
That's correct. Mobile home sales is a permitted use in the C3 zone. And that was included in the zoning bylaw probably around the late 1990s, judging by that number there.
Okay, it's interesting. Permitted use is like a crematorium, like a funeral home could go there. There's quite a list. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before I call the question? Okay, if you're opposed, please indicate. That passes unanimously. Thank you. And the last final reading, 11.5 City of Salmon Arm zoning amendment bylaw 4370. Laird, 10th Northwest C7 to C3, final reading. Director of Development Services.
Your worship, this is for the property in between Canadian Tire and Cal Tire, the vacant lot, flat on 10th Street Southwest. Council's very familiar with it. They just recently approved a development permit for a new Ashley's Furniture Store. There was one condition to amend the covenant on the title, and the covenant spoke to the need for a traffic study prior to development. And the covenant has been modified to allow for the construction of a furniture store only. And the Ministry of Transportation is going through the same process, amending its covenant to allow for the development of a furniture store. Similarly, the city's covenant has been sent into the Land Titles Office for registration. We don't have confirmation it has been registered, but like the previous one, I'm very confident it will be registered. And we still have another process, issuance of the development permit, which we could hold until we get confirmation the covenant's been registered. So I'm fine with this bylaw going to final reading.
Thank you. Could we have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Cannon moves, Councillor Eliason second. Thank you. Council, any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. If you're opposed, please indicate. Seeing none opposed, passes unanimously. Thank you. We're going to go to correspondence, and I see Mr. Laird is with us. Hello, Bill. Do you just want to, yeah, can you speak to us?
I can, yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. And so, Council, I suggest we do item 12.2 before we go through all the informational correspondence, if everyone's okay with that. All right, so we'll go to 12.2, which is WH Laird 151 Hudson Holdings Limited, a letter dated April 8th, Hanoi 36 restaurant application for a sidewalk patio at 141 Hudson Street. There is a proposed motion attached. I would ask if we can get a seconder, and then I'll have Mr. Laird speak to us about it. Councillor Cannon moves. Councillor Wallace Richmond seconds. Thank you. Director of Development Services, do you want to speak to this first, or do you want me to just turn it over to Mr. Laird?
Your worship, I guess as far as my department's concerned, the only thing we need to be involved with is have a building inspection, an inspection of the actual patio if it's constructed. We're not in a position to approve it. We don't have, well, I guess we have the traffic bylaw, but we don't have a mechanism for a senior staff person to approve these. So that's why it's been brought in front of you.
Thank you very much. I understand. Mr. Laird, if you'd like to speak to us about the proposal, we have your written submission, but thank you for joining us online.
Thank you. I'm not sure what council would have for questions. We've provided a drawing. We're making sure that we're using only one parking stall. You can see from the drawing, we have both a plan view, which is aerial, and an elevation view, which is looking straight at the building. And we are going to have 5 tables and the potential for 10 seats. Mr. View is very enthusiastic about doing this. And in my opinion, he seems to be quite skilled at advertising and making things happen. We have considered everything in the sidewalk extension program that was presented to council in April of 2014. And it is our intent to follow that. I have reviewed that with the Director of Engineering and with the Director of Planning. And although they aren't going to be voting on this per se, we have talked about everything that involves. We're quite happy to go through a building inspection report after the fact. We are going to take advantage of the curb and ride up so that there's an opportunity for handicapped access. We are going to be able to work around the street light and the tree that is there. I think it's all pretty straightforward, and I would say again that we're quite enthusiastic about all the work that was done in the original Cafe Extension program by Mr. Neuenhausen. So the only thing that we would like to talk about is the fee structure. We are going to pay the $300. That is, I forgot what that is for. That's an application fee. And then there is a $500 fee that we pay that guarantees we are going to follow the recommendations and not do any damage to the city infrastructure. The one thing we wanted to ask about was the $150 annual fee. Staff has indicated they would rather not waive that, but I guess as taxpayers, and although it's not a lot of money right now, every cent counts. And we could understand it if there was actually a parking meter there, but there isn't. So there's no loss to the city as far as income goes. So that's probably the only concern that we have. So I would entertain any questions that council may have. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate you going through it with us. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you. So just, I guess, a question and some comments. So Bill, it's 300 is the application or the inspection? So it's 300 and then it's, did you say 500 that you're not going to damage anything? So is that kind of like a damage deposit? And then
Yes.
150 every year?
Yeah, so the 300 is the application fee to put it through the process with the city. The 500 is a security deposit, which we pay with almost every building permit, and that's refundable. And the 150 is an annual fee to use the parking stall, and it's been explained to me that that comes to us through the community charter, but that the council has some latitude there.
Can we just refer, Councillor Cannon, can I just refer that to the Director of Development Services for you, just to make sure that we are talking about the right thing? Director of Development Services, do you have anything to add to that? Director of Development Services?
Pardon me, I was on mute, sorry. When it comes to city property, whether it's roads or parks or plazas, the community charter basically says if a business is operating on any of those type of surfaces, it can't be done for free. So I believe when Rob put this report together, staff looked at, what would be reasonable. We looked at other municipalities that have sidewalk cafe policies, and 150 was on the very low end of a seasonal rental for city land for a sidewalk cafe. So that's how that number came to be. And it is consistent with the food truck policy as well. With the food truck policy, where if somebody gets a citywide license, they can go to a number of spots, and that business license fee is about $500. But with that, they're allowed to go to a number of different locations around the city with their food truck. With this fee, it's for half a year, and it's to be allowed to have a sidewalk cafe on city property. So it's almost like a rental. And a lot of the times when it comes to these things, whether it's a right of way or an easement, we actually base it on the assessed value of the land. So that's another calculation we we could use, but we've tried to keep it as low as we can.
So,
Councillor Cannon, you go ahead.
so the question I guess I had is I understand the 150 every season that they're set up there, but do they have to pay the 300 if they decided to do it the next season? Like, is that also a fixed cost every year that they decide to do it? Because it's portable, is it not? Like, it would be taken down, it's seasonal, correct?
Development Services?
That's my understanding. It's a one-time fee of 300.
A one-time fee. So then the next year they wouldn't have to pay the 300, just the 150?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I didn't write the report.
Okay. I was actually on council at the time when we were looking at doing the patio, the outdoor patios. So I couldn't quite remember how.
I think it's a one-time fee.
I have it
know
in front of me here. It is a
lots of
one-time
communities
fee. Applicant's fee. I'm sorry, I overspoke.
It sounds like the 150 is annual and the 300 is a one-time fee.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Well, I think it's exciting to have a restaurant that's interested in doing this. It would be great to have that in our downtown.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. Councillor Lindgren.
Thanks. So one of my questions got answered already, that this is a temporary 6-month setup. I'm assuming that it's taken down at October 31st and the parking spot opens up again for the winter. Is that correct?
That is what we intend to do. Yes, that's what the proposed legislation requested.
Okay, and so the second part of my question is, it says in the guidelines that we only allow one of these per block, I think it said. And so I'm just curious, have we had other applications to do similar patios, and how have we handled them? I haven't seen any since I've been on council, but I know there are some restaurants on Alexander that have outside seating.
Director of Development Services?
We never did get interest after this policy was put together in 2014. We have heard from one other business in the downtown core who has expressed an interest in a sidewalk cafe on Lakeshore, right across from Askey's, this year.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have no comment based on the other comments.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Your Worship. And unless any of my understandings are incorrect, the $300 application is like an application for rezoning or whatever. That's once, first time. The 500 is a deposit. If Bill and his builder don't do any damage, they get that back. And the 150 has been confirmed by Rob that it's annual. Do I have all three of those correct?
Yes.
Okay. I am very much in support of this. I find it amazing that since 2014, when staff and council worked on this, nobody applied. Communities do it all over. If you remember in Halifax at FCM, they do this. Kelowna does it. I will really enjoy seeing this if it happens this summer. So I'm very much in support. And Bill, I'm sorry I can't agree with you. I think $150 annually is fair. But I understand why you're asking. So I will vote wholeheartedly in support. The DSA supports this. And I think this is a great step to making our community a little more pedestrian friendly.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This is a wonderful idea. It's about time. The bylaw came in place before I sat on council, and I'm hoping that, when I read it and when I learned about it way back 5 years ago, it was the staff's best recommendations as to how to approach this. I'm hoping that this is a work in progress and that I think we will fine tune it. We will tweak it. I think the issues of the balance of parking spaces versus one per block, I look forward to having that discussion and navigating that to increase the vibrancy of downtown.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Any other comments from council? Okay, my comment would be, I certainly echo the eagerness from other councillors as well. I think this particular spot, I mean, it's perfectly located because it, as Mr. Laird said, it's an end parking spot, square in front of the Hanoi. So if anyone's going to lose one spot, it would be them, and they're the ones who want to put the restaurant in. We've been really looking forward to this kind of thing. I hope it's just the start of one of many. So I encourage the owner of Hanoi and Mr. Laird to move forward. I will call the question. I will ask for your vote, please. All those in favor? Everyone is in favor. That passes unanimously. Thank you, Bill, for coming online with us.
Thank you for the opportunity, and this is very efficient.
Thank you. Council will go back to 12.1, which is informational correspondence. Please indicate under chat if you would like to speak to any of the items. Okay, Councillor Cannon, I think, does that C mean you would like to speak? Yes, go ahead.
Item number 4 and 5.
Yes, please go ahead.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we support these two requests. I think this is what they're looking for. And I guess I'm optimistically hoping that this is, that we're, well, I know we're probably going to support it, but that the festival is going to happen this year, so.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn has seconded it. Do you wish to speak further to the motion?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. One's the our noise bylaw, the extension of it, and the temporary campground. And I just want to reiterate that Roots and Blues is really put Salmon Arm on the map, and they do such a great job, and I think we need to continue to support them.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. Thank you for being the rep on their board. Director of Engineering and Public Works, do you have any comment? I think we do this each year.
Yes, Your Worship. Each year is approved by council and require a resolution.
Okay, thank you. Any councillors wish to speak further to the motion? Okay, I'll ask for your opposition vote. If you have if you're not in favor, please indicate. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Cannon. Are there any other items, Councillor Cannon, you wish to speak to?
One is the batting cage. Let me just see what number that was. Number 10.
Please go ahead.
Oh, let me find it in front of me here.
Just while you're looking for it, maybe I'll have the Director of Engineering and Public Works speak to us about.
Okay, that'd be great. I got it here.
Okay, Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Thank you, Your Worship. We've been working with the Ball Association for a couple of years now on trying to come up with a solution. They've been requesting to construct a batting cage at Kalahari Park. And so we've recently received this this submission from them. They have $7,000, and we have worked out a potential location for this to be constructed. And so they're looking for council support in moving forward with this and allowing them to construct this on city property.
Okay, I think this is exciting, and I'd like to make the motion that we support this.
Okay, with location. All right, seconder, I think Councillor Lindgren is seconding. Councillor Cannon, do you wish to speak to it further?
I just think that the minor baseball has been wanting to add this to the fields for their developmental program that they've been working on. Their numbers are increasing, their registration, and I think this is exciting for them to be able to have an infrastructure like this that'll add to their training.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. Councillor Lindgren, did you wish to speak to that?
No, actually, only to say that I couldn't figure out from their letter what it was that they were asking for. So thanks to Rob for clarifying that they wanted to build it. They need permission to build it. I guess my only question on this is, I've been hearing that at Klahani, the city had plans to put in batting cages. Is that separate from this, or would this take care of that and relieve us of that obligation?
Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Your Worship, the city did not have plans to build batting cages. The city had plans to build another ball field at some time. So this is an addition. This is something that the minor ball have been looking for.
Councillor Lindgren, any further comment? Okay, thank you. Councillor Wallace Richmond, did you wish to comment on that?
No, thanks, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion on the floor, moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, please indicate if you do not support the motion. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Cannon, did you have any other items?
No, thank you.
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Please indicate if you have any other items you'd like to speak to. Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Item number 9, which is feedback from the provincial government to the UBCM motion on recreational drone usage. So again, we don't have a gallery in front of us here, really, I don't think, but a good example of how citizens come forward, to the council or to the Environmental Advisory Committee, it goes to SILGA, goes to UBCM, and the province responds. I'm encouraged by their opening comment that the government's interested in supporting local governments and managing recreational drone use in sensitive ecological areas. But after that, I'm not sure exactly what they mean. There's some interesting parts there that you have to obtain permission if you're in a BC park. So I have no idea if that's enforced or people are even aware of. But at the very end of the last sentence, in protected areas establishes ecological reserves or areas of parks with sensitive ecological values, UAV use is not permitted. Your Worship, I'd much continue the motion, but what I would like to see happen is, and I would take this on, is to work with staff to figure out what does it take to be officially ecological reserve or ecological values from the provincial point. I don't even know who to approach, but I'd be interested in following this up, again, with some staff help. And I think in the long run, I guess my vision on this here is that if there's an opportunity for our Indigenous communities and the city of Salmon Arm that surround the Salmon Arm Bay to work together to take a position on drone usage, recreational drone usage.
Great, thank you, Councillor Lavery. Thanks for taking this on. The part that was unclear to me, and maybe it was clear to you, was who puts up the signage?
I think that's one of the questions who puts up the signage, who defines what ecological reserve is, or sensitive. I think I'm viewing this as an optimistic approach on something that hasn't been broached before. And I think we just need to fine tune it. It's going to be an ongoing process for sure. And I'd like to follow through on that again with some staff help about contacting who's appropriate. It's not appropriate this time in the situation that we're in right now. There are bigger fish to fry. but I'd like to keep it on the on our radar and would work on it if that's the will of council.
Great, thank you very much. We all appreciate you taking it on further, and I'm sure that staff will work with you.
Thank you.
Any other items on the informational correspondence before we go to 12.3? Okay, I see none. Let's go to 12.3, which is Adrian Bostock, Shuswap Trail Alliance, letter received April 8th regarding the Shuswap Memorial Cemetery Trails. We need a motion in order to move forward with the suggestion. Is there a mover and seconder? Councillor Eliason moves. Councillor Flynn seconds. Thank you. I'll forward that to staff, either Director of Development Services or Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Your Worship, Director of Engineering Public Works, I can speak to this. So what's happened is the Trail Alliance has been successful in gaining some grant funding, and it was identified for the upper loop of the new Shuswap Memorial Cemetery Trail. Through our 2020 budget, we had put towards $15,000 for a project for the lower loop. So what Trail Alliance is looking for here, and I thought this was the most efficient way to do it, is just to seek council's approval to move forward with the construction of the upper loop. So we will need a resolution for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, questions or comments? Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a great example of leveraging our funds using our relationships with great organizations like Shuswap Trail Alliance, and I very much support this. That trail network is already amazing. It's also very flat. So now people that are energetic and want to challenge themselves can do a very significant hill on the back piece of this property. I think this is a great step in the right direction, and ask council to wholeheartedly support it.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. And Councillor Flynn has used, taken my words. The key word in all this, besides having active partners, is the word leverage. And this is what I think people often with local government don't fully recognize, that if we can set aside funds and leverage others. I just, Your Worship, use an example of Shuswap Watershed Council, put $5,000 into boat safety on the lake, was able to leverage almost $20,000 to do this. So this is this is exciting. This is the name of the game. Shuswap is the word leverage, and it's great to see.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Any other discussion on the motion? Yeah, I would certainly agree with both councillors. Trail system, as you say, Councillor Flynn, is awesome already. This will add to it. And the Shuswap Trail Alliance are expert leveragers. So really appreciate their work. I will call the question. If you're opposed, please indicate. An excited yes from Councillor Flynn. Thank you. I see none opposed. The motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to council statements. If you have a statement you would like to make, please indicate on the screen or on the chat line, and I will call you. Councillor Flynn.
Just a quick statement or question to council and yourself, Your Worship, as the CSRD chair, and talking about the requisition and the percentage increase. Is there a desire on behalf of council to send a piece of correspondence to the CSRD with regards to the budget and next year and that kind of thing?
Council, if there is that interest, please indicate.
I know the mayor of Nelson did that with his regional district. I will not make the motion, but I will pass it on if it's made.
Yeah, I don't see any mover or seconder there, Councillor Flynn, and I do appreciate that offer. I as well don't feel comfortable making the motion. I know I did talk to Mayor Dooley and Nelson, and they basically followed the same path as us, but did write a letter to the regional district. So I appreciate the offer. Councillor Lindgren.
Yeah, sorry, can we please refer to where we are in the agenda when we're discussing things? We went from council correspondence to 12.3. I didn't know where that was, so I missed all the discussion trying to find it, and now we've already voted on it, which I don't have a problem with. It was a pretty easy one to support, but it's very frustrating when I feel lost and can't follow what's happening, so.
Sorry, Councillor Lindgren, 12.3 was right after 12. We did 12.1, and I see we skipped to 12.2 and then back to 12.1. I understand.
We went to council correspondence and then we switched back. So I was still looking for it in council correspondence. I know I had seen it somewhere, but didn't realize we'd left the agenda. And on the computer, I have to go to close my whole document and open another one to find that. So I spent the whole time flipping through council correspondence trying to find it and missed all the discussion because I couldn't follow it on my sheet. So it's just frustrating, that's all.
Did you wish to make a comment on it at this time?
No, I have no idea what we just talked about. I missed the whole thing. So yeah, it's done.
Councillor Lindgren, do you know where the item is?
I have now found it because I've just realized that we've gone back to the council agenda. But while I was flipping through to find that causes me to miss the beginning of the discussion of the next item. So I have to leave all that and just move on. It's created a bit of anxiety for me.
Okay. Do you have a council statement you'd like to make?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. So for council statements, I just wanted to share with you, all of you and anyone listening, and for the public record, that I am involved in the vulnerable population emergency response efforts that are vigorously underway. And every now and then a question will come up about what the city can do. So one directive from the province is for us to look into sanitation stations or hand washing stations around the community. I have reached out to members of the social agencies who are also on this call about potential locations, but I wondered, Your Worship, if staff had any advice on when, where, or whether or not we might be able to accommodate any requests should they come about.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace Richmond. Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Sorry, Your Worship, I'm having trouble with my mic. I didn't hear the question.
Councillor Wallace Richmond, would you just repeat the question?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Wondering about the possibility of sanitation or hand washing stations in public spaces in the event that the vulnerable population response group should request such a thing.
Go ahead,
Your
Director
Worship.
of Public Works.
Oh, sorry, thank you. So, Your Worship, we could implement some locations if need be. We have looked at some costing for those stations. They're about $50 to $75 a piece. They would just be manually operated, not like the electronic ones. We would look at, I would suggest that maybe we would put one out at the wharf. Most of the washrooms have obviously sinks and soaps and things like that. It may be an issue for vandalism. That would be one thing to consider. And also for the supply of the actual sanitizers. It seems to be getting a little more difficult to actually find enough for the supply. So, but we could definitely consider that if you're thinking of some different locations.
Councillor Wallace Richmond, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship, and thank you, staff. I appreciate being able to bring that up, that information back. In terms of the art gallery, I have been meeting with them on Zoom on a number of issues. Everybody's working as hard as they can and staying upbeat and positive and responsive. And I'm amazed at their innovation and their optimism. So Art will help us through. And finally, the chamber is also meeting by Zoom. I am missing tomorrow's meeting because I have another call with BC Housing. So very, very honored and very inspired by the work of our social development agencies. These are people with big hearts and big brains, and they deserve our thanks and for all that they're doing. And I'm honored to be working with them.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace Richmond, and we all appreciate the work you're doing there. Councillor Lavery.
Thanks, Your Worship, and I certainly, you spoke for all of us in terms of thanking Councillor Wallace Richmond for that. Your Worship, most of Council is aware of this, but this is an opportunity to put it on the public record about the Community Resilience Investment Plan, funding plan, both in 2019 and again in 2020. The Nisconluth Indian Band and the City of Salmon Arm co-applied for fuel load mitigation and Fire Smart funding. And just recently, the 2020 grant was awarded, and we're on the way. So in 2019, again, this table's aware of it. We created a community wildfire protection plan to prioritize where things should go, and we did some fuel treatment to start off with. In 2020, there will be significantly more fuel treatments, both in Little Mountain Park and in the South Canoe area. The cautionary aspect of this is there's a lot to do, but it has started and we're going forward. And I just want to think in my view, the decision to partner with Nisconluth has been really helpful. And I don't 100% know this, but I do believe that portion of their grant will go to a number of hectares fuel load mitigation in IR number 3 in the Nisconluth section surrounded by Salmon Arm. So it has started. More information to come. We'll have a city website with links to it, and we'll flange in with the CSRD approaches as well. So this is all great news.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery, and thank you for your work on that. I see that you're getting it out into the media, so much appreciated, the fire smarting. Councillor Lindgren.
Hi, sorry, with some afterthought, I realized that I could report out on our board meeting from SASLA. We met on Thursday after a week's delay because we couldn't get the technology to work the first week. But we were successful in meeting this week, and they are, or last week, I guess now. They are hopeful that the fair will be able to go ahead, so they're planning for that. They are well aware of what the deadlines might be for deposits on people that are coming in, and when they would have to cancel things and not lose their deposits. They're also talking about ways to improve things like social distancing by either eliminating or reducing the number of indoor events, depending on what the recommendations are from the Minister of Health, and making some of the things that are happening during the fair more relevant, as in maybe presentations on pioneering things like growing your own vegetables or those sorts of things, rather than some of the things that we normally do. So they're trying to make it more relevant, and they're really hopeful that it'll be able to go ahead.
Great, thank you.
I had a question for Louise, if I can ask that.
Yes.
I'm just wondering about there's a lot of talk amongst ourselves about the McGuire Lake Inn possibly being used to house homeless. Is that actually going ahead? Is it becoming public? I'm starting to see other people talking about it on Facebook, so it seems like some people know. So I'm wondering if that's been confirmed.
Councillor Wallace, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, thanks. So part of the vulnerable population emergency response role has been to identify properties that would be suitable in the event that we had to move vulnerable populations from where they currently are to somewhere else. I can confirm that that building is on the list and inquiries have been made, and trust me, as soon as I have the answer, everyone will know.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace Richmond. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. Don Dunlop did provide a similar update to Councillor Wallace Richmond on that issue at Economic Development meeting this morning at 7:30. So it is still a work in progress, but relatively optimistic. As your DSA representative, I'd heard a rumor that tomorrow is Order Takeout to Support Local Restaurants Day in Canada. So I will encourage everybody to pick their favorite restaurant and order takeout for either lunch or dinner tomorrow and support our small downtown restaurants and restaurants that are trying to stay open and provide takeout service. National Takeout Service Day.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. I'll make sure I mention that on the radio tomorrow because tomorrow's Wednesday.
You might want to check that it really is a day and I'm just not making it up, but I'm sure I heard it.
We'll make it a day in Seminary. Okay, Councillor Eliason.
No, just if anyone has any, I have a UBCM meeting online tomorrow. So if anybody has any questions or thoughts or anything they want answers to that I might be able to help with, send me an email.
Thank you, Councillor Eliason. Thanks for your liaison with the UBCM. Okay, that's a question for Councillor Flynn. Okay.
And if anyone has any complaints about the new chair of the CSRD, please forward those over to me as well. Happy to take those on.
Thank you. I see no more speakers to council statements. So we don't have the Secondary Youth Council. There's no notices of motion or unfinished business or other business. So CAO, did we receive any questions from the public?
No, we have not.
Okay, then we will recess until 7 p.m. Don't forget your spoons and pots because we're going to thank our frontline workers at 7 o'clock. Council, again, thank you for logging in. You'll log in another time with your link at 7. If you have any difficulties, please just let Erin know and she'll help you out. But I think everyone's got the 3 links now. Thank you very much, Council. Thank you, staff, for all of your input. And we'll see you back here just before 7 o'clock.
And tomorrow is officially National Takeout Day, April 15th.
All right, got it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Erin, I'm going to turn off the recording now.